I know you've been talking about ad nauseum about them, and you love talking about them, but this is the last one. We'll give you a break after this for all Niners stuff. But I guess we can just compare and contrast this 49ers roster compared to the 2019 Super Bowl roster. They did really well in the playoffs. They got to the championship game. Nothing to snuff at there. So I guess I'm gonna reverse the order here. Vish, I'm gonna start with you. What are some of your, I guess, main comparisons and maybe some differences between that roster, the 2019, and this current roster?
So first and foremost, right, I think the biggest question is that roster went to the Super Bowl, and people are thinking that the question is this roster is good? And I mean, roster to roster, I think the biggest unknown, right, is the quarterback and how much of an upgrade is Trey Lance going to be starting day one. Quarterback aside, I think this roster is worse. I do. If you go position by position, I think 2019, I think running back and receivers, I would actually give it to 2021. I think 2019 receiver was a massive question mark going into the season. I mean, Deebo Samuel didn't even work with the starters the entire offseason, and week one he started. And Dante Pettis was supposed to be the starting receiver, and he didn't play a snap week one versus Tampa Bay because Kyle Shanahan, he forgot about him. So let's rotate him in for 4 snaps against Cincinnati. You know, that was a story that people forget at the beginning of the 2019 season. So I think, and then running backs, Breida and Coleman. Coleman was actually very solid before he hurt his ankle in 2019, but the combination of Mostert, Sermon, granted Sermon's an unknown, but Mostert to me is running the football, especially within this scheme, at a higher level when he's played than both Breida and Coleman. So I think it's better there. Tight end's a push. Offensive line to me is a push. Just because still there's question marks on who the starter is at right guard. Maybe I'd give a slight advantage to 2021. The bigger difference to me goes in the defensive side of the ball. And I think 2019 had a better secondary overall. I mean, Jaquiski Tartt being on the COVID list to me is a loss. I know people are hyping up Tavon Wilson's camp. I'm sorry. I cannot buy into that one, that he's going to compete for the starting job with the guy in Jaquiski Tartt who's been a consistently very good football player for the 49ers for his entire tenure there. I think the defensive line is better in 2019, especially if you look at the top to bottom depth that they started with guys like Ronnie Blair and those type of guys who were contributors early in the season and got hurt. And then you look at the fact that they also had a bad man named DeForest Buckner, and to go with Eric Armstead, a healthy or as healthy D Ford, but a fully healthy Nick Bosa, only with the ankle, not rehabbing the ACL coming into the season. So from that standpoint, I think it's better. Overall, I mean, you're looking at two really good rosters. To me, you're looking at two different rosters. I think 2021 has to win a different way than 2019 won. But overall, if you ask me to compare and contrast and maybe give you a roster I think is better, I would give a slight edge to 2019 just because I felt a little better with what they had overall on defense. Just I felt better with their safety duo, especially with Tartt not coming back from COVID yet. I felt better with their corners with Richard Sherman and Ahkello Witherspoon, and I just felt a little better about their defensive line.
Okay, here's the way I see it. The defense is not as good. The defense is downgraded. They lost Robert Saleh. Nick Bosa isn't as healthy as he was back then, right off the bat. Now, we'll say, though, they've got some intriguing depth in the interior, like Street and Givens and Kerr and Jones, and they still have Armstead, who's a good player. They have good players in the D-line, and if D Ford can give them a full season, which I don't know if that's realistic or not, but if D Ford could do that, this defense could be really special again. So I wouldn't say that it's going to happen, but he's been exceeding expectations. So that's the one caveat I'll say there. And then on offense, I do think the switch from Garoppolo to Lance is going to be a big deal. And
okay,
I mean, the run game right off the bat should be better. And then, I've been seeing him, the pass game should be better too. If you go position by position, you could probably give it to 2019. But if Trey Lance fulfills the promise that he's showing in practice, he's the most important position. This team has a real chance. I wouldn't write this team off as a Super Bowl contender if Lance can carry this on and D Ford can be a significant player.
If real quick, Blake, if you say D Ford's a significant player, I wouldn't even write him off as a Super Bowl contender.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So they have a chance. It may seem a little far-fetched, but every day it's like, D Ford's still out there. D Ford's doing a little bit more. Trey Lance is still consistent. Yeah.
All I gotta say is both of you know D Ford's been looking good since February.
Yeah. So hey,
I told you that. So
this could be the team that wins it. I don't know. Trey Lance could be the first ever rookie quarterback who goes to a Super Bowl and wins. Who knows?
Blake?
Interesting. Yeah, I guess my first thing, then, I think the biggest difference is, you kind of mentioned it, Vish, DeForest Buckner. Having two I mean, it's not even a reach to say just two elite defensive linemen is so much more impactful than just having one. I mean, we were talking about Armstead got a just enormous contract, and he was like the third best guy on the D line. And him going to number 2 or even being the best guy last year, you see how different it is. And I mean, watching the Packers game against the Niners, like, we had a good offensive line, especially pass blocking. They always do. But watching DeForest Buckner and Nick Bosa come off the defensive line it's just frightening, because every play you just don't know what's going to happen. So I'll say that. But yeah, I mean, really, as you guys,
I just got a call from KTVU. I'm doing a hit in like 2 hours. Hold on, I'll be right back.
Okay.
I just have to hold on. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Give me 2 minutes. I'm sorry about that, everyone.
You're all good, Grant. What was I saying? Oh yeah, I think you mentioned it too, Vish. It really boils down to Trey Lance, and is he this guy that we think he can be? But I'm also interested in seeing if they do go from Jimmy to Lance. Do you think that'll be a good or a bad thing? Like in the middle of the season, say like week 4, it goes from Jimmy to Trey Lance. Like, do you think that'll help them or be worse?
Look, you know how I feel. I think going to Trey Lance at any point of the season isn't going to be a bad thing, because it should be all about going to Trey Lance whenever Trey Lance is ready. So I think that even if Trey Lance, doesn't play as well as people think he is capable of playing his rookie season, I still don't think it's a bad thing, just because the investment in him is so much, and playing is never a bad thing, in my opinion, for a quarterback. I mean, it can ruin confidence at times, but I don't think Trey Lance's confidence is going to get shot playing with the roster that he's playing with, the defense he's playing with, the run game he's playing with. And the biggest thing is, Grant talked about it, right? The run game. The run game aspect with Trey Lance is going to be very, very elite, because they had an elite run game in 2019 without him, and now you throw in the ability of the quarterback to run. It's going to be scary. I do want to say one last thing, though, that I think is very important in the distinction, and I touched on it a little bit when I answered this topic originally, is the difference is that I think 2021's team is going to have to win a little more offensively than 2019's team did. Like 2019's defense used to just defensive line, those 4, Ford, Bosa, and I also think having Quan Alexander, his speed and pass coverage was beneficial. He's maybe not as good a tackler as Greenlaw, but he's better in coverage than Greenlaw. That I don't think that's undisputed. But if you look at 2019, those 4, even though it might not maybe have been as deep in interior rotation, those 4, Buckner, Armstead, Ford, and Bosa, like you mentioned, they devastated teams. They single-handedly devastated teams. It was difficult to throw the ball 2 yards against them because they were on top of you so fast. And they were a historic defense for the first 8 weeks of the season, and then injuries and attrition and D Ford's health really just caught up to them. But that's really the most important thing. Like 2019 was able to win a lot of games defensively. I think 2021, though they'll still have a good defense, they have to win games a little more offensively.
And I would almost say that's a bad thing for 2021. Like, you'd rather have just a more dominant defense. Now, obviously, you need a good offense, right? Like, you have to have both to be a good team in the playoffs, because all the other teams are going to have at least a good and average one or the other. That's just the nature of it. But I mean, when you get down into like December and January, like, you don't see any average defenses going out there and playing. Typically, it is very rare, and when they do, they usually do not win the Super Bowl, because the other teams are going to have either elite or great on both ends.
Absolutely.
So I'd say that's almost a bad thing for them at this point. The fact that there is a lot of questions with the secondary. They did lose DeForest Buckner, and Kinlaw could eventually become a lot better player and do have that production, but it's still an unknown at this point. So I'd say from that perspective, and this team did go to the Super Bowl, so we're comparing a team that last year got the number 12 pick to now a team that was in the Super Bowl. But I think it is an interesting debate in the fact that this offense could carry them to potentially that level, depending on how good Trey Lance is.
Absolutely. Grant, anything more to add?
No, I think Blake got it good. I appreciate you, Blake. Sorry about that.
Got it covered for Mr. QC.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
I delegated.
before we move forward real